It's time for Tim Talk on the Big Fat American Channel. I'm Zach Martin, along with Timothy Welsh, who is an advocate for people on the spectrum. He's going to update us about what's going on in the world of autism, what's happening on the spectrum, maybe some of the latest political happenings, maybe the latest in data research or science or whatever it might be. But before we do that, Timothy, I wanted to take a little time to discuss something that's been on my mind for quite a while. When you look at the number of people that are on the spectrum, let's just call it 1 in 55. I don't know what the latest update is. And you go across the United States with a population of over 300 million people. That number tells me roughly 1/3 of our population is on the spectrum. And then you have people that know people that are on the spectrum. It might be part of their own family, their neighbors, friends, and even some of their enemies. There's just every direction that you look, there's somebody that might be or living on the spectrum. And I know a lot of times we talk about vaccines and the link, and we talk about what's going on in the political spectrum, what the causes are, what the treatments are. The one thing that gets ignored, I think, a little too much is what do we do now? Once a child or a young adult is diagnosed as being on the spectrum, you have to deal with special education and various therapies, and a lot of people go bankrupt that I know because insurance doesn't cover everything. And then you get to the point where the kids are in their young 20s, and let's just say the education isn't what it needed to be, and everybody's doing their best. What kind of jobs do we have for people on the spectrum? What kind of jobs do we have for disabled people? What kind of jobs do we have for the primary caregivers? That's why I'm trying to put together a media company and create jobs for people on the spectrum, and it meets the person where they are. So if they're in the middle of Illinois or in the middle of, New Mexico, wherever it might be, I think that there's some tasks that we could assign somebody and pay them a decent wage and provide benefits for. It's going to take quite a lot to put it all together, but I really think that a lot of us have to start focusing on what do we do with our situation now? What do we do as far as working? What do we do to contribute to society? And how do we get form a political bloc that has to be dealt with, much like people that are members of AARP, you know, the senior citizens. They have a nice bloc. They're a very powerful bloc. They have representatives on all different levels that I guess you might say worry about their issues. I don't think we have people worrying about our issues enough. And obviously the job sector is something that is really all over the place. And that's why I want to take this big fat American idea and make it into a company where people can work from where they are and create micro radio stations, online radio stations, buy up some radio stations, have some benefit concerts, provide news sources, be active on social media, all those different kind of things. So I would like a little bit of your opinion on what I just spoke about, and then we'll move over to what's going on in the world of autism.
Well, one of the greatest things that we can do for families dealing with autism and developmental disabilities is to give them a sense of normalcy and to address the psychological needs of all the family members. Now, Facebook has a new TV commercial running that they've had focus groups put together, and experts come together and say, this is what we need to rehabilitate Facebook. And their commercial right now is running a nice little ad where fathers and daughters are picking out their New York Mets, New York Yankees, Chicago Cubs, the Los Angeles Dodgers outfits, getting matching outfits, and they're all going to games together, father and daughter, hand in hand, and the warm, fuzzy feeling that you get from going to a baseball game and having that experience with your son or your daughter. And what the wonderful thing about what you're proposing about a media company is so many times the fathers, the mothers, the brothers, the sisters, and the person who has the developmental disability really don't have a way to connect and build their self-esteem, build their egos. And maybe they're not all the way functional as far as being able to do the job. Some will be, some won't be, but bringing it in as a family affair or a father-son or father-daughter type activity is just an amazing thing that to me is the selling point of what you're saying as far as a media company and then bringing in these jobs for these families. You've told the story before that when you talked about your daughter coming in and helping with the social media, it was the process of doing the job that raised her self-esteem. It wasn't necessarily cutting her the check for the hours that she worked and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
so I think it's a fantastic idea.
The money aspect had nothing to do with it. It was about honoring her as a person and the respect that she is due. We're all due respect. We all should be treated equally under the law. We all should be loved, right? I mean, love thy neighbor. Treat people as you want to be treated. These are the golden rules, and these are the rules that really should be behind everything that we do. Even when we are advocating for a group, we have to also love the people that don't agree with us. And we can't start getting up in front of a group of people and it turns into a shouting match and you're trying to persuade somebody by eloquent arguing. It's not going to work. People are going to tune you out. I think that we have to all dial it back a little bit. And, even with our dealings with, if you want to look at pharmaceutical companies or big pharma, yeah, they do some bad things, but they also do plenty of good. So we have to strike a balance of making sure that everything we do, especially when it comes to our health and well-being, is the best available option for the individual, and that you have to do some risk analysis. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm not going to mention the medication by name because I'm not really sure if it's related to this problem I'm having. I've been suffering from gout for quite a while. I made my dietary change, Timothy. I don't eat a lot of those rich foods. I'm pretty much a vegan like yourself. Occasionally I have a little bit of meat, but nothing too heavy, And I kept going to the foot doctor, and they kept giving me the cortisone shots in the big toe, and it was just making matters worse for me in the long run. It's okay to go there once in a while, but when you're going every few weeks, it's not obviously working. So the doctor prescribes me 2 different medications, and I'm taking that one. Everything is fine. And he goes, I'm going to switch you to this. It's a cleaner drug, as he said it. And I've been taking it. I have no flare-ups, but now I'm having problems with my hips and various other joints. So I asked my wife, I go, it's kind of weird. I got this problem in my hip and another joint over here. She goes, well, that's a side effect of your medication. We read the side effects of the medication. I'm like, oh, great. So it's take your pick of your misery. Now I got to have another discussion with him the next time I see him, tell him about these symptoms and maybe go back to the original medication. So my point being is, yeah, the medication is good for most people, but it's not good for everybody. And then you have to do your risk analysis and decide whether it's good for you or not. And when you decide to make any changes, you have to consult your physician because there are medications, if you just stop cold turkey, turn out the lights, it could be over for you, or worse things might happen. So it's taking the time to do your research. Now, here's the other aspect of it, Timothy. I've always said ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance will get you killed. And that is a very true statement. Might call that Zach Martin's law. Ignorance will get you killed. So with that perspective and with that kind of lens, that's how I'm approaching everything that you and I encounter, whether it's the work situation, whether it's vaccines, whether it's living on the spectrum, whatever it might be. I've had to, get rid of the anger out of my heart, which is a good thing, and not get those negative feelings and bundle them up and make somebody a target of hate. So it's easier said than done, but I think if we start to, maybe just let the dust settle and start to have good, honest, and open, frank discussions out of love and respect, then I think we can make a lot more positive strides. Because if you were the company that's making a quote-unquote a vaccine that's supposed to remedy whatever the disease or disorder, and, if it's coming from the right mindset, then I don't have a problem with that. It's when you start to knowingly inflict damage that there's a problem. We have to stop those kind of things. But so I think we got to strike a balance. That's my basic bottom line.
I think our audience knows that we come from a Judeo-Christian perspective and background, but I really have been thinking about karma and putting positive energy back out into the world the last few days. I manage about 25 pages on Facebook and groups actively, and I've been spending a enormous chunk of my time recently just having to edit off statements made in anger by the audience. And it's just a waste of my time. And I just keep thinking to myself, there's nothing gained by wishing ill will upon another person or putting out into the world something that may negatively impact the opposition.
Well,
as far as saying somebody, we used to have these rules of engagement that we kind of played by, and so many of those rules are being broken at the moment.
Well, here's a couple of things that work on so many different levels. If you're angry, don't send a response in anger. Let's say it's an email at work. Don't do that. If you're angry and you just want to get it off your chest, go to the right person and talk to them, or a fellow coworker, and just vent. Don't go to anybody and respond in anger. Don't send those emails out. Those can kill you. They're career killers. Be careful what you tweet. Be careful what you post on social media. Again, career enders, career killers. We've seen this in the world of athletes. We've seen it in the world of actors. We've seen it in just the regular business world. We've seen it with kids in college. We've seen it with kids in grammar school. It caused a lot of trouble by not thinking it through. Just remember, once you put it out there, it's very hard to take it back. I mean, you can delete the tweet, but chances are if someone doesn't like you, they already have captured it on screen, ready to go after you, or give it to somebody who can go after you. So you got to be very careful about what you place online. You got to be very careful about what you say. I know sometimes in our discussions we get heated and we get angry about certain situations, but I don't think we've ever singled anybody out by name or even a company by name and taken our anger out on them. We've vented on this show. Yes, we have. But I think we try to keep it at least somewhat, it's opinionated, right? Somewhat civil to the best of our ability. Sometimes you talk about stuff that really gets your blood boiling, and it should get your blood boiling, especially if it's harming fellow human beings and animals. We have a responsibility to be as kind and loving as possible and to take care of our surroundings. So, and it's these little things, Timothy. For instance, when you're getting ready to take a shower, think about the people in Africa that don't have the water that we have. Maybe you want to shorten that shower down just to teach yourself how to control your resources, because you take it for granted that clean water is always going to be available. We don't know what can happen. And then you'll have to learn how to live with less, or just eat less, because if you eat too much, bad things happen. Just be cognizant of your surroundings. Don't throw paper wrappers out the window. Don't stand for people who are cruel to animals or children. That's just a no-go, right? So these are just basic precepts that helps everybody. And again, back to where I started at the beginning, don't do things out of hate. Now, what's the latest information about going in our world on the spectrum? I know RFK Jr. has been really busy. I know that there's been some rallies across the country. People are being heard about their take on mandatory vaccines, all of that kind of stuff. Can you give us an update of what's going on?
Well, absolutely. This season for every state government has been a season of bills put forth by the pharmaceutical companies to alter your freedom and the relationship with the doctor-patient relationship. And I would say right now it's about 50-50 that we've been able to push back and win as many as we've lost. But the problem is once your rights go away, they never come back. And so that's something that until everybody feels the pain of their freedoms just evaporating, we all need to kind of stand up and say something. And the brilliant thing that's happening is the talking points and the videos and the clips and the facts that we've been putting out there are really getting through to the politicians. I've been talking to our video editor this morning and saying, let's put together a video kind of like we did with the celebrities and saying that #celebs know. let's do reps know and say, let's look at some of those historical speeches on the floor and at rallies and put those together. And it's really uplifting when you hear those representatives and senators come back and use the talking points and say what they're doing as far as ways taking away freedoms and choice and our ability to talk in the town square is really against the Constitution of the states and Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, once you give away a right, it's sort of like a tax that's established. You're never getting rid of that tax, that's for sure. One of the people that I like to follow on Twitter is at Autism Journal, and it's titled The Beauty of Autism. It's obviously a young lady who is on the spectrum, and she's always posting very positive things, very nice things about her life and experiences. And I see a lot of likes by Katie Wright, who is a big-time advocate for people living on the spectrum. When you think of the political, I guess the political tides right now, you're right. It's in flux and it goes back and forth. And it might be something that we could control a little bit better in that there's a couple of things. One, like I said, I want to start this media company, which means buying up some terrestrial radio stations, which means you have to develop your own news staff and way of delivering news, which can be done through any location throughout the United States. So if you're newsy, let's just say you're a person on the spectrum, you really love news, you got a nose for the news, there's an opportunity for you to have a newscast. If you're really into your particular type of music, your genre, there's an opportunity for you there. But besides all of that, besides what we can do as working individuals, to just think that somebody else is going to handle it or that's somebody else's problem is also a real defeatist attitude. I don't think if you don't vote for whomever in the election, if you're not going to take the time to vote, then I think that until you get another chance to vote, unless you have a good reason, you should shut up about it because you didn't even participate in the process. If you were constitutionally prohibited from voting at the time, that's another, I guess, difference there. You weren't 18. You weren't able to legally vote. Now you can. Now you're taking part of the process. Before that, you relied on other people to probably vote on your behalf and your family and stuff like that. So you're active. So if you're active during the election cycle, then I don't mind when you have something to say after the election has been determined. With that in mind, there's another aspect of this where if you have time to complain about something on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever social media platform, you certainly have enough time to pick up the phone, send emails, write letters to your representatives, and to the President of the United States. Just remember, they serve us. We don't serve them. There might be this mindset, we're the ruling class, but that doesn't exist in the United States of America, last time I checked it. If we're not careful, that's exactly what's going to happen. So my, I guess, challenge to each one that's listening right now is to be proactive. If there's something that you believe in, make it known to your representative. It doesn't matter what party the representative is part of. You have a right to contact that person. They represent you, regardless of their party. They have to hear you out. And believe me, they pay attention, especially when they get letters, because a letter to them means 1,000 votes for some reason. They got these weird sort of formulas of what each phone call, what each text or email or tweet or letter means in regard to votes. So that's my little advice, free advice. Advice is free. You can do with it whatever you want with it. What are some of the interesting things that you've been seeing working with these vaccine movies that you're part of?
Well, right now we're in the final editing stages and putting together, and there's a lot more memes floating around about the Vax 2 movie, which the first movie, Vaxxed, actually presented a CDC whistleblower that actually still works. Dr. William Thompson still works for the CDC and revealed how data was manipulated and, in a lot of people's opinion, is fraudulently acted upon and disguise the information of the connection between autism and vaccines, and especially in African American individuals. on the next movie, it takes it a step further, where a bus was sent across the whole United States and gathered stories from parents and expanded the discussion from just the MMR vaccine to pretty much every single vaccine. And you actually get to hear the witnesses' stories firsthand. And again, when it comes to murder, one person can cause somebody to be convicted of murder. When it comes to a vaccine injury, we can have tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, and it's seldom that the voices of those that have recognized those injuries actually get respected and supported in some way.
Well,
we use this term herd immunity, but as soon as your child or your family member is injured, the herd seems to turn its back on you.
Yeah, that's one of the problems. I think if people are going to follow social policy and a child is injured as a result, or an individual is injured as a result of following the social policy, everybody's got to get the measles shot. Well, there's always going to be some side effects to every single medication. Like I talked about this medication for gout, and it's killing my hip, and there's other medications that we've heard about. You watch television, could cause sudden death. Well, listen, if sudden death is a side effect, I'm not sure I want to take that. There's another medication that I take for prostate in which the side effect could be the worst form of prostate cancer. Do I really want that? And it made me nervous. I had to talk to my doctor, and he talked me off the ledge. He goes, no, it's like, a very slight chance. Now, what if the slight chance does happen to you? Then what do you do? And specifically when it comes to vaccine damage, then what do you do? What are we going to, a lot of people get damaged by these vaccines, and you're right, the herd turns their back on them, and now we have a whole generation of people without meaningful work, and here I am, one guy trying to figure out how to create some sort of honorable, meaningful work for people, and it's an uphill battle. And as long as it's not my kid, nobody really cares. That's the other part of it. And the stupidity of, let me just finish this, the stupidity of the comments that I see. You better get your kid vaccinated. I don't want to get measles. Well, when was the last time you got vaccinated for measles? Well, when I was a teenager in 1984. And by the way, you know what? These vaccines and the measles, the measles, the viruses are mutating. So I don't want to get the measles. They got to get vaccinated. I already had my vaccine. Well, if your logic is that the virus is mutated, then you're not protected. You don't have immunity against the latest measles virus. So you need a booster shot if that's your opinion. So the mandated vaccines doesn't only apply to the child, it applies to you. So when you explain that to them, then they change the argument, or they just drop off, or they that's it. I'm going to block you. I've just had it with you. Hold your breath. But there's some truthfulness to that, what I just said, right? How many times have you seen that? People, I'm immune against that. Are you sure? Because if it's a new form of the virus, you're not. You're immune to whatever measles was at the time. And, my wife had she had a rubella shot when she was a little girl. And they did the titers on her when she was pregnant with my daughter. And it turned out that she wasn't there was no immunity for rubella. So they wouldn't release her from the hospital after she gave birth to Sophie unless she got the rubella vaccination. And they accused her of not being up to date with her vaccines. And the mom jumps in. She goes, she got a rubella shot. Oh, when was the years? 1983 or something like that. And the nurse goes, oh, that was a bad batch. Okay. So there are problems with vaccines. It's not 100% fixed for anything, right? You gotta bring the risk analysis back, and some don't work. Some are ineffective. A flu shot. How many times have you ever heard somebody say, well, I got the flu shot, but I ended up with the flu because it was the wrong kind of flu shot, right? That didn't match up. It wasn't the correct. So it's a guessing game, and it's Russian roulette. And I guess, it's a shame that people think that way. Well, it's not my problem. It didn't happen to me. I'm clear. Are you sure you're clear? Because you don't know what kind of DNA damage some of these things that you take into your body are going to do down the road. There's people from 9/11 that were down in New York City that are now getting cancers almost 20 years later as a result of their exposure to whatever toxins were in the environment 20 years ago. So these are kind of things you got to question. And listen, don't think that I'm a flat earth kind of guy, that I deny that we live on this globe of a world. They'll tell you that you're wearing tinfoil hats because you think such things. These are my opinions based on facts. You're entitled to your opinion based on facts. And just because it's different does not mean that either one of us is a complete idiot. I might be a little bit of an idiot, but not a complete idiot. Timothy?
You touch on so many different points that could be a week-long seminar as far as what is actually happening in the world of vaccines and boosters. But it boils down to two things: that humans are very terrible at doing risk analysis. That we've done a number of videos. If you search Tanner's Dad and autism and vaccines, we've done a number of videos putting together and just saying how bad humans are at risk analysis. But then the second part of that is humans are very bad at looking at things on the horizon and assessing how it really impacts them. Mm-hmm. And when I said the erosion of rights, I was talking about basically the three basic. We've already had the right to sue the vaccine manufacturers taken away in 1986, and we can't sue them when they make a mistake. So that brings up a whole mess of problems there. But basically what the pharmaceutical industry is fighting for right now is the removal of philosophical objections where you just say, I don't want the vaccine, religious exemptions where you say, because of my faith, I don't want the vaccines. But they're also now fighting for the doctor-patient relationship where the doctor has given a medical exemption. The doctor has said because of some, let's say a relative in your family started getting seizures after vaccines or an autoimmune disorder or something else, they give a medical exemption to the other child in the family and say, maybe you should think twice about getting that vaccine. Well, we all have a problem with California. I think that it's pretty safe to say that even Californians have a problem with California. But what California is doing today is a bellwether that they push across the whole country. And today they're taking a vote on their law, SB 276, where they're actually altering the relationship between your patient and the doctor forever. They're saying that the government from now on, the state government will now decide whether you can have a medical exemption, not your doctor.
Very interesting, because
this is a $10 million bill adding to their budget that they really haven't discussed the bill to go with it. But like you said, if there's damage done now that because the state is dictating these vaccines, then the state's going to be liable in this case.
Well, no. My mom was murdered right in front of me by a serial murderer who worked in hospitals, and they're very well protected, and there's a cap on liability. So believe you me, if the state is behind it and they're, set against something or they're setting something up for whatever reason, there's nothing you can do against the state. I mean, there's very little you can do. It's just a lot of, they really make the bar high for you to go after them, and they have lawyer money. We don't, right? Unless you have some do-gooder lawyer who wants to take them on. And I would say, like a lot of those politicians who takes on the system, it doesn't bode well for them. I mean, 1968, June 6th, what happened to RFK, Robert F. Kennedy? That guy had definitely a way about him and completely different mindset, and was taking on the government as it was in that time, and he ends up getting martyred as a result. So, let's not kid ourselves that we're any more benign now than we were 51 years ago. The thing about these laws, and I'm going to just use this as an example, there's a couple of things that I call it being a hypocrite. When you go, I have a right to do what I want with my body, but I'm going to tell you what you should do with yours, is one of them. You had a very liberal abortion law in New York, which meant that you could abort a baby up until the time of its birth. And everybody was jumping up and down and clapping and smiles on their face. I don't know how you can be a person with a conscience and smile signing a bill like that. That, to me, is a tragedy, that any person, innocent person, any person has to die because of, some bad decisions that they had nothing to do with. But that's more than that. I guess the reaction to the New York liberal law, where everybody was jumping up and down, okay, and clapping and smiling, was what happened in Alabama. So the same people that were clapping happy up and down in New York because they thought they had it exactly their way, were not happy when it went completely opposite somewhere else. And that opposite was a result to the salvo that was fired by New York and then a couple of other states that did the same thing. So this is human nature, okay? I'm going to show you that this is what we're going to do. We're free to do whatever we want over here. And the response is, oh, yeah? All right, then you're not going to have that freedom over here. It's not going to go for it. So this is what you get. You get polar opposites of the same sort of, views, right? Polar opposites. Instead of somebody going, well, there's always an exception to every rule, which there is, right? There's nowhere, not even in a religious mindset, there's nowhere in the world that says that you have to kill yourself for somebody else. So, when you're talking about the life of another individual, that person does not have to lay down their life if they don't want to for somebody else. There's nothing that anybody can make you do something like that. That's an ultimate act of love and an act of sacrifice. And people do that on a daily basis, but we don't really have to go there. So my only point in bringing that up as an example is how polar the laws can be. So while California is doing one thing, you might have a response from, let's just say, Alabama, which will be totally different. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case, but you see where I'm going with this? So that's how the system works, really. It'll flush itself out. And I would think that once one of these politicians, they get what they got coming to them through karma, as you put it, then their eyes are going to be open and they're going to go, uh-oh, what do we do now? It's one of my own. And that's going to happen. That's just how things work. So that's my take on that.
There's two ways for this to go. I mean, you're a braver man than me to bringing up the subject you just brought up, but the two ways that this can go is right now there's meetings going on and conferences going on for the World Health Organization, and they're sitting around just salivating over the fact that at some point during one of these made up, the boy who cried wolf, whether it's Zika or Ebola or the flu or measles, mumps, whatever it is, the epidemic of the day, they're just salivating over the moment where a few people die from that. So that's the one direction that they're hoping that goes. But the other direction that they're not recognizing and bringing to the forefront is every day that goes by, more and more people are seeing how unhealthy that their family is.
Yep.
And so my proposal is taking things back to 1978. It's going to be interesting tonight where they have an original script from the Jeffersons and All in the Family to see how they edited that. You and I are old enough to know what the Jeffersons and All in the Family represented to that time period. It'll be interesting to see how they edit that to be acceptable to the population right now. It's being directed and produced by Jimmy Kimmel, and so I'm sure it's going to be softened or they're going to twist things so it comes from their perspective. So I'm very interested in that. But bottom line, that time period between 75 and 85, our children, our families, our world was much healthier, and now we've added 72 vaccines to our little kids. They're unhealthy. And so we should hold them as any job reviewer would. Okay, you've given the kids 72. You have 271 in the pipeline. When are we going to say stop? And when is enough? And how do we get back to being healthier? So I'm offering a positive point of discussion, not, you want your kids to have autism or no, I want to prevent preventable disease. No, I want I want the children to be healthy and have a robust immune system the way God intended.
Hey, listen, if they find a cure for cancer and it's a vaccine, I'm all for it, all right? If the vaccine's going to work to prevent you from dying of cancer, great, that's fantastic. If it's going to keep you from getting cystic fibrosis, another win-win, okay, that's fantastic. But some of these vaccines that we are all upset about, whether it's the chickenpox, let's just say chickenpox. Come on, I had the chickenpox twice. I know everybody go, oh, if you had it twice, you got leukemia. I don't have leukemia, as far as I know yet. But, these...
But what if I suggested that it was those 72 vaccines
that caused the leukemia, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So...
Well, there's always that part of it. Now, let me just back up a little bit. If someone's tuning in or just heard what I said about the abortion laws, I wasn't making any pro or con stance. I was telling you the reaction of when you have one law in one place, the reaction from some other place is going to be completely different, and you shouldn't be surprised by that. So New York went all the way up until birth, and Alabama pretty much is restricted to all types of abortions. That's what I'm talking about. And that, I guess the political hot potato with that thing is to try to get the Roe versus Wade heard again on the Supreme Court. These are just academic kind of views. They're not pro or con. I'm against abortion, believe me, but I'm not making any sort of political statement, nor am I taking a side in this discussion. I was just trying to illustrate the reaction that people give when, they disagree. Like, again, New York versus Alabama, you shouldn't be surprised that happened. Now, in regard to what Timothy is talking about, the possibilities of all of these vaccines, the cumulative effect, and maybe the negative things that can come out of it, I always thought about this, and it's kind of goes along with my line of thought and healthier living. If we were going to be very picky, and we should be picky about the things that we ingest and the things that we eat and drink, we want clean water. We want good food, wholesome food, non-GMO food. We don't want to eat meat. By the way, today's meat is nothing like what the years Timothy was talking about, 75 to 78. It tastes completely different. We don't want meat with growth hormones and, this super farm kind of stuff, antibiotics, right? Antibiotics, by the way, right, are getting to the point where they're not really helping people with their diseases or whatever they might be suffering from. Then they have to have different types of antibiotics. See, too much of a good thing is also too much of a good thing, right? It's not good for you. So if you're going to question all of that stuff, why don't you question the ingredients of the vaccines that they're putting right in your bloodstream, which has no defense mechanism against those foreign invaders? And here's the other thing. Is a little bit of cyanide okay to take? Timothy, would you take a little bit of cyanide?
No, thank you.
Okay. My point, a little bit of cyanide is bad, so you're probably going to avoid anything that has the ingredients of cyanide. Would you take a little bit of lead? No, thanks. Would you want a little bit of mercury? I don't think so. We're told not to play with that stuff ever since we were little kids. Would you want a little bit of, Ebola? If they came out with an Ebola vaccine and they said, here in the United States, we have to vaccinate you against Ebola with the outside chance that somebody who gets it from some village comes to the United States and it's treated here and it somehow escapes the laboratory. We need you vaccinated by Ebola. Just a little bit of Ebola. A little bit of Ebola won't kill you, or it might. Would you do that? So this is, as crazy as that sounds, you got to think of all of those different things. They all have to come in play. Would you drink tainted water? Would you take a little bit? Let's say you were given $1,000 to drink the leftover refrigerator water on the radio as some sort of stunt. Would you drink that water for $1,000, the slime on it, and take your chances and it might kill you? Would you do that? Probably not. So once again, we're back to where we started. How about just thinking this stuff through, doing your risk analysis? And, in relation to the medication I was taking for my gout, or I'm taking for my gout, now I have a series of questions I got to go back to the doctor about. I got to make an informed decision here because having hip pain is not good. And if I had to choose between the hip and the toe, I'll take the toe. All right. So It's one of those kind of things. And we're just bringing this stuff up, food for thought, something to contemplate. If it gets you angry, sorry about that. If it gets you motivated to be more active in your community, maybe to think about your neighbors, maybe to think about people around you that don't have it so well, that's a good thing. If it motivates you to pick up the phone and call your representative, great. We've done our job here. That's all we're asking. Ask the questions.
The example that I use that kind of wakes people up, if we had a cult and, we were going to serve Kool-Aid or cupcakes or something like that, and 1 out of 100 cupcakes killed a kid, or 1 out of 1,000 cupcakes killed a kid, and it was a cult, there would just be all sorts of uproar that 1 in 1,000 cupcakes killed a child.
Well,
and that's the situation we're in now, that 1 in 1,000 vaccines are doing this damage to our kids, and we're seeing it across the board, but nobody is even willing to even count or even look at the damage that is being done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess unless it happens to you, for a lot of people, unless it happens to them, they're not going to know any better. And, again, ignorance isn't bliss. Ignorance will get you killed. How can people follow the great Timothy Welsh?
Well, we have an opportunity this week for you to come and meet me in person in Chicago at the Autism One conference, autism1.org. It's autism1.org if you're in the Chicagoland area, or you just want to fly into Chicago O'Hare and zip across the Lowe's hotel. I'm happy to meet you. Otherwise, just get on any form of media and put in Tanner's Dad, and I'll pop up on Twitter, Facebook, Google, Yahoo, all the list of things that you can find me on. I'm out there, and I'll interact you. Again, I just passed the mark on my one main account of 235,000 live tweets, tweeting over 10 years.
That's fantastic. And on the Big Fat American Network, you can hear Timothy weeknights at 8 p.m., followed by Thank God at 9. We have a new show at 9 a.m., which is Ray Kay, and he has all kinds of very interesting guests. We got sports, we've got authors, we have all kinds of, and music, new music. So make sure you follow the streams or check out the streams at ZachMartinRocks.com. I'm available at Zach Martin Rocks on Twitter, Facebook.com/BigFatAmerican. You can always send me a private message if you want, or you can email me, ZACH, at ZachMartinRocks.com. Are you going to be doing live tweets from the conference?
Live tweets, and the first time in over a decade that the conference is actually going to have some live streaming, and I'm going to be doing some interviews of some of the speakers and vendors and just the sights and sound on Facebook Live and actually through the Autism One channel.
Oh, great. Mention my name. I'm sure you'll get a black eye. Just kidding around. All right. Well, thank you for your time today, Timothy. We'll talk next week, maybe during or after the conference, and you can give us an update about some of the latest information that you've gotten, who's doing what, and where we should go from here.